Okay, so if these papers were published in 1971, why did the war keep going until 1975? The whole point of it was that they were afraid that they would turn the public against the government and stop the war. Why did it take 4 more years? The Post, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, and Bob Odenkirk. Okay, so this movie is about, in 1971, a guy at a corporation that's not fictional called Rand Corp. So that means Danny Rand must be real, and if Danny Rand's real, then Daredevil's real, and the whole MCU is real. But this was all before Danny Rand was born, so it's irrelevant. But a guy who worked there stole some of the documents, took them to a hotel room and photocopied them, and then gave them to newspapers. And the whole movie hinges on the fact that Nixon put out a federal injunction against the New York Times, and then the Washington Post got involved. So I thought this was a really good movie. It was thoroughly enjoyable, but like Molly's Game, about a pretty boring subject. But I think Steven Spielberg did this one a lot better than Aaron Sorkin did with Molly's Game, probably due to experience. Steven Spielberg's been doing this for a long time, but this was no Munich, this was no Bridge of Spies. This was, a perfectly passable Steven Spielberg movie. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about it, because, everyone in it was great. Meryl Streep, she had a really strong performance as that lady who was, at first she was like afraid of the men who were running around trying to take control basically from her. She was pretty indecisive, but then she grew a backbone by the end of it, and it was a really good character for being based on a real person, because usually, you got to take the flaws with the good. Tom Hanks was excellent. Bob Odenkirk was excellent. There was a secondary cast that was also huge with, with David Cross and Alison Brie and everybody. So it was a very easy movie to watch. I think the pacing was a little bit slow at times. Maybe not, because it was a fairly short movie. It couldn't have been more than an hour 50 with the credits. But there were times when I was wondering, I was like, how much longer is this? It was very relevant. I understand why this movie was made. It was relevant to this time period because of all the, Chelsea Mannings and Edward Snowdens. So it still has a message that I understand, and I think that's the important part. Is it's a kind of complex movie, but they presented it in a way that even I could understand it, and that's the best you can really ask for with these kind of things. I wish I knew more about the history around it so that I could try to critique that, because aside from when the Vietnam War ended, I don't really know anything about that era. That was more my dad's bag. Yeah, so it's hard to really find a whole lot to say about it. I guess the message of the movie is that the press exists to oppose those in charge. They quoted some founding father, I think, saying that the press exists for the governor, not for the governors. So that's a pretty good message to have. I was comparing this a lot to Molly's Game just because of the style of it. I think the dialogue in this was a lot more natural. They allowed themselves to talk over each other rather than talk as close to each other as possible, which I really hope makes sense. And I got to see a little bit more of my favorite actor, the back of Richard Nixon's head. Because you know how they do that a lot. They'll just do the side or the back of Richard Nixon. Not like that Frost Nixon where they actually had a dude look like Richard Nixon. Which I think, I saw a guy in Legion. He was the main guy in Weekend at Bernie's. But I think he would make a really good Nixon, because he's kind of already got the face for it. You just got to put the weight on, which you can do Darkest Hour style, like how they do with Gary Oldman. Unless that's not makeup, and Gary Oldman really put on weight for that. I don't know. I think you should check it out, but honestly, I didn't need to see this in theaters. I would have been just fine watching this at home in 4 months. So, it's up to you. I don't care.